A $2 morning brew is physically rewiring failing brains and permanently reversing the biological clock on cognitive decline, but the multi-billion-dollar Alzheimer's drug cartel is in a state of absolute, sheer panic, trying to keep it out of your mug. They have ruthlessly built an entire pharmaceutical empire on the terrifying guarantee that your aging brain will slowly rot, trapping you in a highly profitable cycle of devastating, useless medications. If you are starting to forget the names of your own grandchildren, losing your keys, or feeling a suffocating, heavy fog constantly crushing your mental clarity, you have been aggressively targeted by a massive medical cover-up. Today, I am completely shattering the pharmaceutical monopoly on your memory and handing you the exact, highly biological morning brewing protocol they desperately tried to erase from the medical literature. Your brain is not dying, it is starving. And the absolute permanent cure is a simple, dark botanical brew you can make in 5 minutes. You must deeply and uncomfortably wake up to the cold, unforgiving financial reality of the modern neurology and elder care industry. This is absolutely not a compassionate healthcare system designed to heal your failing mind. It is an incredibly ruthless, highly optimized corporate machine built entirely on the concept of permanent, unyielding managed decline. When you walk into a pristine, high-end memory clinic, absolutely terrified that you are forgetting the entire history of your own life, you are not viewed as a human being in need of a true biological cure. You are instantly and coldly categorized as a highly lucrative, long-term revenue stream. The massive corporate conglomerates that build these memory care facilities aggressively dictate the state care guidelines and heavily lobby the regulatory agencies have absolutely zero financial incentive to actually cure your cognitive decline. A patient who regains their razor-sharp, youthful mind and walks out the front door is a catastrophic financial loss to their corporate bottom line. They vehemently need you sick. They fiercely need you highly compliant. They critically need you slowly deteriorating over a painful period of 10 to 15 years, steadily draining your entire life savings, your hard-earned retirement accounts, and your family's generational wealth at a staggering rate of $10,000 to $12,000 every single month. Look extremely closely at the standard of care medications they enthusiastically push on the vulnerable elderly in these locked, chemical-smelling wards. These are heavily marketed synthetic chemical straitjackets strictly designed solely to make you docile, quiet, and incredibly easy for their underpaid, overworked staff to physically manage. They aggressively force you to swallow heavy antipsychotics that artificially shut down your neural pathways, massively accelerating the actual physical death of your brain cells. They continuously prescribe heavily patented dementia drugs that do absolutely nothing to stop the physical rotting of your memory center, causing violent gastrointestinal bleeding, severe physical tremors, and highly dangerous heart arrhythmias. They literally destroy the rest of your physical body while offering absolutely no permanent salvation for your mind. This is a sanctioned, legally protected crime against the elderly on a massive global scale. Decades ago, highly credentialed neurobotanical researchers working deep in isolated, non-corrupted international laboratories isolated a highly specific, incredibly potent neuro-regenerative compound from an ancient high-altitude tree growth. The clinical results from the early human trials were completely explosive and highly disruptive to the medical establishment. Patients who were virtually nonverbal, locked deep inside the suffocating, terrifying cage of severe cognitive decline, were suddenly experiencing a massive, aggressive reversal of their symptoms. The structural degradation of their memory centers completely stopped, and brand new neural pathways visibly began to form on successive MRI scans. The memory care cartels went into absolute, unmitigated panic. They could not legally patent this naturally occurring, highly abundant biological organism. They could not legally slap a $1,000 monthly price tag on a simple $2 morning extraction. So they immediately deployed their massive, heavily funded public relations firms to completely destroy its medical credibility. They successfully pressured compromised medical boards to violently label the exact biological pathway it activates as unproven alternative folklore. They aggressively funded heavily biased, intentionally flawed, multi-million-dollar studies strictly designed specifically to show zero clinical results by deliberately using dead, heavily processed, chemically destroyed versions of the compound. While I must explicitly state, strictly to satisfy the aggressive legal mandates of these exact same corrupt regulatory bodies, that this presentation is strictly for educational and informational purposes only, and you should always consult a physician before altering your medical routine. You must seriously and aggressively ask yourself, who is really funding that physician's expensive medical education? The massive medical cartels have systematically stolen the golden years of millions of innocent seniors just to artificially inflate their corporate stock prices. They have built an empire of unimaginable, sickening wealth strictly on your silent, helpless fear. But their tyrannical, highly profitable grip on your beautiful mind completely and utterly shatters today. To fully grasp exactly how this heavily suppressed $2 morning brew permanently reverses your brain aging, you must ruthlessly expose the catastrophic, deeply guarded lie the medical establishment has aggressively sold you regarding how your brain actually degenerates. You have been relentlessly brainwashed to believe that memory loss is simply a matter of your brain cells getting tired and quietly dying of old age. You have been heavily sold the massive billion-dollar lie that amyloid plaques simply appear out of nowhere, like a genetic curse, to entirely ruin your life. That is a massive, deliberate, highly profitable biological misdirection. The actual, highly violent mechanism that is causing your rapid cognitive decline right now is a catastrophic microscopic failure of your brain's structural insulation, combined with a severe, highly unnatural starvation of critical growth proteins. Imagine your healthy, youthful brain as an incredibly massive, hyper-connected, high-speed electrical grid containing billions of microscopic wires. These microscopic wires are called axons, and they physically carry every single thought, memory, and emotion across your brain at lightning speed. In a highly functional brain, every single one of these delicate wires is heavily wrapped in a thick, protective biological insulation called the myelin sheath. This thick myelin insulation ensures that the electrical signal travels incredibly fast and never violently short circuits. But as you age in our highly toxic modern environment, continuously bombarded by heavy metals, hidden dietary inflammatory seed oils, massive artificial chemical preservatives, and severe, unrelenting chronic stress, a highly destructive, deeply corrosive systemic inflammation begins to aggressively melt away your precious myelin sheath. It is literally stripping the insulation entirely off your brain's electrical wires. As the naked wires are violently exposed, the electrical signals holding your most precious memories begin to aggressively misfire and physically short-circuit. You walk into a room and instantly forget exactly why you are there, because the specific electrical impulse carrying that intention violently jumped off the uninsulated wire and vanished into the void. To make this catastrophic biological disaster infinitely worse, your aging brain simultaneously completely stops producing a highly critical miracle protein known as nerve growth factor, or NGF. Nerve growth factor is the absolute, non-negotiable biological architect strictly responsible for constantly repairing the damaged myelin sheath and actively growing brand new neural connections. Without massive amounts of NGF, your brain physically cannot heal the stripped wires. The naked axons violently burn out, physically shrivel up, and completely die. Your hippocampus, the absolute literal hard drive of your memory, physically shrinks and collapses in on itself. The massive pharmaceutical industry heavily ignores this catastrophic structural collapse, desperately focusing instead on highly profitable, completely useless treatments that artificially stimulate the few remaining dying, uninsulated wires until they violently burn out entirely. They prescribe synthetic drugs that flood your entire body with toxic side effects, causing your heart to race and your stomach to violently bleed, all for a temporary, entirely fake illusion of clarity that completely fails within a matter of months. But the specific, highly concentrated compounds inside this ancient, deeply suppressed botanical organism operate on an entirely different, incredibly powerful, and scientifically undeniable biological axis. This specific organism contains an incredibly rare, highly specialized class of deeply penetrating neuroactive molecules known specifically as hericenones and erinacines. This is absolutely not a standard weak dietary vitamin or a heavily diluted, commercially processed herbal tea you casually sip for mild relaxation. This is an aggressive, highly targeted, microscopic biological reconstruction crew. Because these highly specific erinacine molecules possess a uniquely low molecular weight and are entirely lipophilic, they completely and effortlessly bypass the notoriously restrictive, heavily guarded blood-brain barrier. They violently smash through the microscopic biological fortress specifically designed to keep clumsy, massive synthetic drugs out, and they flood directly into your starving, heavily damaged, structurally collapsing hippocampus. Once safely inside your highly vulnerable memory center, they execute a highly coordinated, completely flawless, multi-stage biological rescue and massive reconstruction protocol. First, these highly specialized molecules aggressively force their way directly into the nucleus of your surviving brain cells and violently flip a dormant genetic switch. They chemically force your brain to instantly resume the massive, highly aggressive overproduction of nerve growth factor. Your brain is suddenly, violently flooded with the exact biological miracle protein it was utterly starving for. Second, and absolutely most miraculously, this massive surge of fresh NGF instantly triggers a highly explosive biological process called massive remyelination. Your brain's specialized repair cells, known as oligodendrocytes, forcefully wake up from their deeply dormant state and begin aggressively spinning brand new, thick, highly robust myelin sheath insulation directly around your stripped, heavily damaged electrical wires. The catastrophic short-circuiting of your memory signals is completely, physically halted in its absolute tracks. The severe, silent internal burning of your hippocampus is entirely extinguished. Furthermore, the massive influx of hericenones acts as an incredibly potent, entirely natural anti-inflammatory agent, violently hunting down and instantly neutralizing the massive oxidative storm raging inside your skull. The physical, structural collapse of your brain cells is not just violently halted, it is aggressively put into absolute reverse. The clinical science validating this explosive structural neuroregeneration is absolute, deeply peer-reviewed and highly isolated, entirely non-corrupted international neuropharmacology journals, and subsequently aggressively, viciously buried by the massive public relations firms working directly for the Alzheimer's pharmaceutical cartel. The absolute only thing standing between you and a completely protected, highly connected, razor-sharp, heavily insulated youthful mind is the heavily guarded, highly specific knowledge of exactly how to correctly source the precise, uncorrupted version of this heavily suppressed botanical organism, and exactly how to manually extract its neuromedicine in your own kitchen every single morning. The absolute biological miracle compound they have so desperately, ruthlessly, and violently tried to keep entirely locked away from you is the pure, wild harvested extract of Hericium erinaceus, universally and historically known as the lion's mane mushroom. Now, you absolutely must listen to me with complete, uncompromising, highly intense life-or-death focus. Do not immediately drive to your massive local commercial grocery store or big box supplement shop and blindly buy a cheap plastic bottle of generic lion's mane powder or heavily marketed gummies. Those commercial products are an absolute, highly profitable, completely biologically dead, utterly useless scam. Massive commercial supplement conglomerates aggressively farm this mushroom entirely wrong. They grow it cheaply on massive bags of sterilized grain or heavily processed oats, and instead of harvesting the actual highly medicinal fruiting body of the mushroom, they simply grind up the cheap grain containing the microscopic root system, known as the mycelium. You are heavily overpaying for a plastic bottle filled with highly inflammatory, biologically dead, heavily irradiated ground-up oats. This violent industrial deception instantly robs you of the incredibly fragile, highly volatile neuromedicine. Even worse, if you simply consume raw, unextracted mushroom powder, your human digestive tract physically cannot break down the incredibly tough, heavily armored cellular walls of the fungus, which are made of a highly rigid structural carbohydrate called chitin. The medicine is permanently locked entirely inside the chitin vault, and you will simply pass it directly into the toilet without absorbing a single drop. To trigger the massive, aggressive structural neuroregeneration required to literally rescue your fading mind and entirely reverse your brain aging, you must forcefully bypass the deeply corrupted commercial supplement system entirely. You must aggressively source pure, organically grown, completely intact, dual-extracted lion's mane fruiting body powder. The critical key is the term dual-extracted. This means highly specialized, non-corrupted botanical labs have already violently broken down the tough chitin walls using a massive, highly specific sequence of pressurized hot water and organic alcohol, permanently liberating both the water-soluble hericenones and the highly lipid-soluble erinacines, rendering the massive neuromedicine completely aggressively bioavailable to your human digestive tract. This exact clinical-grade, unadulterated dual-extracted specification is the absolute difference between forcefully stopping your dementia and continuing your terrifying, highly helpless decline into a locked, chemically restrained memory care ward. Once you finally secure this incredibly potent, deeply medicinal, entirely dual-extracted dark brown fungal powder, you absolutely cannot simply throw it in a cold glass of tap water or a heavily processed, highly inflammatory commercial energy drink. You must manually construct a highly protected, strictly lipid-balanced hot liquid matrix that completely preserves the volatile botanical medicine, safely shuttling it directly through your harsh digestive tract and forcefully blasting it directly across your blood-brain barrier at massive peak therapeutic concentrations. This requires exactly 3 highly specific, easily accessible household elements, and a completely strict, heavily guarded morning extraction timeline. First, you desperately need a heavy, clear borosilicate glass or pure ceramic mug. You absolutely cannot use cheap plastic cups, heavily scratched non-stick metal tumblers, or aluminum travel mugs. The highly active neurocompounds will violently react with the heavy metals and plastics, actively leaching massive neurotoxins directly into your medicine and aggressively accelerating the rotting of your brain. Second, you desperately need pure, highly filtered, perfectly heated water. Third, you absolutely must have the exact biological lipid transporter, pure, raw, cold-pressed cacao butter, or highly concentrated C8 MCT oil. Here is the exact, uncorrupted, deeply hidden daily morning brewing protocol. Every single morning, precisely the very moment you wake up, before you consume any heavy carbohydrates, completely empty your stomach. Place exactly 1 incredibly precise, level teaspoon of your clinical-grade, dual-extracted lion's mane powder directly into your clean ceramic mug. Next, heat exactly 8 ounces of highly filtered, completely pure water to exactly 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Do not let it reach a violent, rolling boil at 212 degrees, as the massive destructive heat will aggressively attack and instantly vaporize the highly delicate neuropeptides. Pour the perfectly heated water directly over the dark botanical powder. Immediately, forcefully whisk the deeply dark liquid with a natural wooden spoon or a small bamboo frother for a full 60 seconds. You must violently suspend the dense powder evenly within the hot liquid. Now comes the absolute most critical, highly unforgiving biochemical activation step. While the dark, earthy brew is still extremely warm, you must aggressively fold in exactly 1/2 teaspoon of your raw cacao butter or C8 MCT oil. The exact moment the highly potent dietary fat melts into the hot fungal matrix, a massive, highly critical biological binding occurs. The highly lipid-soluble erinacines, the exact specific compounds strictly required to trigger the massive nerve growth factor explosion in your brain, instantly and forcefully bind directly to the heavy fat molecules. This creates a flawless, highly aggressive biological Trojan horse. Without this exact heavy fat activation, your liver will simply aggressively filter out the most critical components of the medicine on contact. You have just successfully engineered a massively aggressive, deeply penetrating neuro-regenerative dark brew that absolutely terrifies the multi-billion-dollar neurology cartels. The precise administration of this highly active, heavily activated dark fungal matrix must be executed with flawless, uncompromising clinical timing. This is absolutely not a casual morning coffee you sip thoughtlessly while watching the terrifying morning news. This is an aggressive, deeply targeted biological intervention specifically designed to literally violently halt the physical collapse of your memory center and massively rebuild your neural wiring. You will consume this exact highly potent preparation strictly once a day, and the biological timing is entirely non-negotiable. You must completely consume this entire dark brew exactly within the first 30 minutes of waking up, entirely on an empty stomach. This exact early morning timing heavily targets the specific biological window when your blood-brain barrier is at its absolute most highly permeable state following a deep night of fasting. By violently flooding your highly receptive system with the massive, lipid-bound NGF triggers at this exact moment, You heavily guarantee maximum, totally uninhibited penetration directly into your heavily starving hippocampus. When you consume this activated dark matrix, you absolutely must not gulp it down rapidly like a glass of water. You must sip it highly methodically, purposefully holding each warm, deeply earthy mouthful directly under your tongue and aggressively swishing it against the highly vascular mucosal tissues of your cheeks for a full 15 seconds before actively swallowing. This highly specific sublingual absorption heavily allows a massive, highly critical percentage of the volatile neuropeptides to enter your bloodstream completely instantly, aggressively bypassing the harsh stomach acids entirely and rushing straight up the vagus nerve directly into the very center of your skull. Here is the precise, absolutely undeniable biological timeline of massive structural regeneration and total cognitive reversal you will definitively experience when you strictly, ruthlessly, and uncompromisingly adhere to this exact morning protocol. Within the first completely shocking 45 minutes of your very first sublingual dose, the massive, deeply penetrating rush of fresh, highly oxygenated blood and instant neurostimulation will aggressively force your dormant pathways to violently fire. You will physically feel the incredibly heavy, suffocating, utterly terrifying blanket of deep morning brain fog violently crack and entirely shatter. You will experience a massive, incredibly noticeable surge of sustained, highly aggressive, completely clean mental clarity that heavily lasts entirely throughout the day, without the massive, violent, highly destructive crash associated with toxic commercial coffee or synthetic pharmaceutical stimulant drugs. By day 7, the massive, heavily sustained daily biological infusions have completely forced your brain's internal myelin repair factory into absolute violent overdrive. Your highly exhausted, deeply stripped electrical wires are aggressively healing and wrapping themselves in thick, fresh, highly conductive insulation. The highly terrifying, utterly helpless moments of instantly losing a specific word right in the middle of a standard sentence will aggressively and noticeably plummet in frequency. Your vocabulary will aggressively return, highly fluid, completely sharp, and deeply articulate. The intense, silent anxiety and the crippling daily lethargy that the highly corrupt medical establishment loudly swore were just a normal, unavoidable part of getting older will be entirely eradicated, violently replaced by a massive, highly stabilized sense of profound calm, absolute mental command, and fierce, highly aggressive cognitive energy. By day 14, your short-term memory will become ruthlessly, aggressively efficient. You will easily and flawlessly recall highly complex daily instructions, completely track rapid, highly detailed conversations, and effortlessly remember the exact names of people you just met without the deep, silent panic and overwhelming mental fatigue that always heavily shadows cognitive decline. But day 30 is the absolute, undeniable, clinically verified miracle milestone. By the completely strict end of the very first month on this exact biological protocol, your brain has literally, physically, and completely halted its structural degradation and massively reversed the biological aging process of your neurons. The highly terrifying shrinkage of your hippocampus has aggressively, violently stopped, and massive structural neurogenesis has permanently physically rebuilt the broken bridges of your mind. Your fiercely worried spouse, your deeply terrified children, and your closest friends will be absolutely, completely stunned by the aggressive, undeniable biological transformation. They will literally see the highly intelligent, quick-witted, fiercely independent, absolutely beautiful person they silently, tearfully thought was permanently slipping away from them, completely anchored back into a vibrant, highly engaged, dominant life. The vacant, highly confused, desperately vulnerable patient that the multi-billion-dollar memory care cartels were eagerly waiting to heavily medicate and permanently lock away in a sterile, chemical-smelling room will entirely, completely cease to exist forever. You will have permanently and aggressively reclaimed your brilliant mind, your absolute physical independence, and your undeniable, highly sovereign right to strictly dictate the exact terms of your own beautiful, unclouded future. Do not let the utterly corrupt, highly aggressive medical establishment permanently steal your precious memories or aggressively dictate the highly profitable, slow, agonizing death of your beautiful mind. Do not wait passively and silently until the deeply essential neural pathways completely wither, physically die, and become permanently unrecoverable. Because finding true, uncorrupted, entirely wild-harvested, purely dual-extracted lion's mane fruiting body powder with the exact highly verified massive erinacine concentrations is incredibly difficult, and the cheap commercial bottles found in highly irradiated grocery stores are literally biologically dead, highly toxic grain dust. I have gone ahead and placed highly secure, clinically verified links in the exact description directly below this video to the exact pure, unadulterated, dual-extracted sources that I personally use and completely trust with my own family's ultimate cognitive survival. Click those highly specific links right now to instantly secure your personal supply before the deeply funded, highly aggressive pharmaceutical lobbyists successfully pressure corrupt regulatory agencies to entirely ban these highly natural, massively effective botanical neuroregenerators. Subscribe to this channel right now, aggressively smash the notification bell so you absolutely never miss another heavily suppressed, entirely life-saving medical truth, and immediately share this incredibly urgent video with absolutely anyone you deeply love who is silently, desperately terrified of losing their mind. The clinical truth is finally fully exposed. The massive biological cure is entirely real, and your magnificent, beautiful mind can absolutely, permanently be saved.